if you guys could possibly like comment on where you think things are going to be going forward. I want to hear, especially from Canada, Korea, and from America, is like, do you think that with US we're going to head into another surge because of a variety of different reasons, and we're going to have to slow down our practices privately, academically? Obviously, we're doing emergencies as well too. What do you guys foresee? And Canada too, obviously shut your borders, done a tremendous job up there. It sounds like, enforcing public health issues. What are your concerns going forward the next 6 months or so? And then Korea, again, model as far as a response to the COVID pandemic, but recently also having their own challenges. Appreciate you sharing that. So if each of you could just briefly comment on what your thoughts are for the next 3 to 6 months, that'd be great. Oh, I'll start with Yujong. Dr. Kim, why don't you start? Yujong Kim first, then Esther Kim, then Henry An, and then Jin Song, please.
I mean, I think that for the next 3 to 6 months for me, it will be probably more of the same. I did take a dip in the number of clinical patients that I saw and did and the elective surgeries, but my actual revenue hasn't reflected that, and I'm not sure if it's just kind of the lag in the billing cycle and whatnot. I mean, I'm definitely lower in volume, but after June 8th, we're offering both in-person visits and telehealth visits, and my elective surgeries are starting to really reach back at the level that they were. And of course, I take care of spinal stenosis, herniated discs. I don't do a lot of the big surgeries, so the patients are eager to get back in. And so I'll have to say it'll probably be more the same 3 to 6 months from now. So I don't anticipate anything hugely different.
Thank you. Dr. Kim, Esther?
I think it'll be interesting to see. Recently in California, we rolled back some of our reopening strategies for the economy due to the spike in cases. In San Bernardino County, which is where Loma Linda is in, was a part of that. And I think currently Riverside County, which is the county just adjacent to San Bernardino County, they've essentially stated that they're at about 100% ICU capacity at this point. Obviously, that doesn't include the surge capacity that you can do to expand ICU beds. San Bernardino County isn't as affected as Riverside, but we are adjacent. So we're about 50% capacity for COVID beds at Loma Linda currently. It might be a little higher now. That was a couple of days ago. It'll just depend on the trajectory, essentially, in regards to the utilization of the hospitals, whether or not we ever get to a surge capacity. But we are still doing planned procedures. It's hard to, in spine surgery and in neurosurgery, we don't necessarily call them elective procedures per se, but they're planned procedures with different types of urgency, right? And from our volume standpoint, when we looked at it from a practice, we're back on track to be at the same volume, but it'll remain to be seen if we have to cut back if the infection rates continue to go up.
Steve.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah. So, I think there's a few challenges for us that I'm visualizing. One is the ramp up has been busy, and the government wants us to try and catch up to what was missed out. So, what this may mean is operating basically weekends, after hours, etc. For example, for the past 30 days, I operated 25 out of those 30 days on cases. And it's just been constant along with the trauma. The other challenge, I think, is trying to ensure that we have enough PPE as the volumes increase. So a lot of our PPE came actually from Michigan, our N95 masks. And so obviously Trump has certainly allocated that volume for the United States. So right now, one of the challenges is actually getting Canadian manufacturers online, and that's coming about, but it's still not fully there. And then lastly is this whole issue with the second surge. Like it could be a very real situation in the winter months. We always have flu season here in Canada, And I can see how, even if someone comes in with a sniffle now, that it will be treated like COVID in the winter months.
Thank you. There's a question from the audience I'll get to in a second from Dr. Bay. Before, I'd like to have Dr. Song. What are your thoughts about how things are in Korea? Because it sounds like volumes of surgeries have not been impacted too much. Everyone's just being super, super careful there.
The thing is, the study I showed you is the just anecdotal data. So I didn't see comprehensive study on burden on healthcare system, particularly for spinal surgery. So just bear in mind that this is just a small example. So what I'm concerned is in the next few years, couple of years, a couple of months is again, the excess mortality is in US, in Canada, in European countries, excess mortality is heightened. It means not only in COVID-19 victim, but non-COVID-19 disease, the mortality will be increasing in the next few months if we, unless we address this issue seriously. So, for example, in Korea, in South Korea, so far so good. But if the capacity, surgical capacity, medical capacity doesn't meet up the next few months demand, maybe we are going to suffer from the heightened high mortality rate and also overwhelmed healthcare systems. So I think in Canada, in US, in South Korea, we have to prepare for next few months to prepare the PPE and stockpile other materials. So that's what I'm keep emphasizing to our organization in South Korea.
So there's another couple questions. We have to sort of wrap this up. First one is contact tracing. Do any of you speakers have any experience with contact tracing? I know in Korea they've done that. The US, it's been limited. How about Canada? Are you still doing it? Is it effective? What are your thoughts on that? I'll start with Dr. Song, actually, so in Korea.
Okay. I'm EIS officer, so what I'm doing is the identifying the cases and following up the cases, and also the isolate cases and quarantine of contact. So Korea, the unique way of the finding cases, also contact, is utilizing the IT, like epidemic intelligence supporting system, which combine CCTV, card transaction, even the bus ticket, the mobile bus ticket. We all combine those information one platform. So when we go find the cases, we'll automatically that information on patients, the whereabout, where patient has been as reported on the screen. So that's what we Korea doing. Of course, there are some issues on privacy and issues of the privacy. So, but we think for common good. Also, Korean, through the experience of MERS outbreak, the Korean public, they are accept. They at the expense of their privacy, they may they give some they accept those little bit of the interference.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important thing, for the public good. Thank you very much. How about Canada? Has Canada been doing tracing, Dr. An?
Yeah, so I'm not. I've never been involved in contact tracing, but certainly the public health departments in each geographic region are heavily contact tracing. It's part of their mandate. And also COVID swabbing. There's a mandate to do at least 25,000 tests a day right now. So, and you can get swabbed regardless of your coverage. So, even if you're not a Canadian citizen, they're encouraging people to get COVID swabbed, even if asymptomatic.
Great. And then I guess I was going to ask our American surgeons as well too. I mean, at least in California, we haven't been doing a lot of contact tracing. I assume you guys have any personal experience with that? There's a poll up, by the way, too, if you guys get answered about how full your hospitals are right now. Be interested to do that over time. But anyway, Dr. Kims, any perspective on contact tracing or no experience?
I mean, I think we've upped the number of contact tracers. I think our public health departments for both San Bernardino and Riverside County have kind of tried to ramp up hiring for contact tracing. You know, I haven't had any personal interaction with contact tracing from the health department. But, you know, from my own personal practice, we did have a COVID positive 19 patient on our service. And with that, you know, we had to trace through the EHR, like everyone that had, you know, seen that patient for the 48 hours prior to the positive test and the first positive symptom. And then, you know, we had to then go down the list of notifying our department, just in general, that there was a positive patient on the list, and then all the people that had contact, whether or not they had symptoms. And luckily, our occupational medicine department kind of took on the onus of reviewing all of this and trying to see if people needed to be tested or quarantined. Interestingly enough, if, you know, they say if you have symptoms, you don't even need a test, just quarantine. If you're not symptomatic, then that's when actually the testing is helpful to try to get people back to work. So that was kind of our experience in our department.
Okay. We really need to wrap this up. I'm going to give Brian Sue 2 minutes because he basically said that he has some input on contact tracing as part of a task force here in Northern California. So Brian, I'll give you 2 minutes and then we'll move on. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so we're trying to, you guys can hear me? We're trying to contact trace here. As you guys know, San Quentin, which I can see from my house and office, has about 2,500 inmates right now that are positive. And we have parts of the canal within Marin that self-identify as Latino, and there are areas there that are, you know, where 80% of the population is positive. The problem with contact tracing is just getting staff to do it. So we're working with Health and Human Services, but those staff have to be bilingual. And it's actually very, very challenging to do that because of just the bilingual nature of doing contact tracing.
Brian. Well, this is Dr. Bay. Hey, how are you? Just what is the penetrance of contact tracing? What means that somebody has to get quarantined? You know, meaning that you ride a bus, okay, there's a whole bus get quarantined, then another passenger on that bus rides another bus. Does that whole bus have to get quarantined? Like what truly counts as a contact?
My impression is it's 2 degrees of separation because you can contact trace all the way down, but I think it's within 2 degrees. I wouldn't quote me on that. I have to ask our Health and Human Services person, our county director, Matt Willis, which I can, because you can't, I mean, obviously you can contact trace to infinity, right? Because there's one contact that has another contact, has another one. So I believe what we're doing in Marin County is 2, maybe 3.
Can we get Dr. Song to answer that question?
Okay. So we will, the Korean EIS officer is find the contact by looking at whether they are wearing a mask and also distance from the case and the cases, and also how long will they have a conversation or not, depending on that a couple of factors. We designate whether he or she is a contact or close contact or not. So we only contact trace only close contact in the beginning of this epidemic. But later on, we came to know that even asymptomatic cases can transmit the virus to the exposed person. So we now in Korean government KCDC strengthening contact tracing, even including more broader the people. So and using the widespread, the wide range of the diagnostic testing. So I think it depends on the context, or it depends on the country where you live. For example, in the U.S., I think you're unfortunately. I'm sorry for the U.S. citizen and the U.S. doctors, but so far your contact tracing capacity just the beginning in the CDC. So of course, you are the other capacity, US CDC and the HS is quite amazing, but unfortunately, just the even though contact tracing is a key pivotal part of the epidemiology containment, you just started. Even the US, if you look at the US CDC website, I think a month ago you just put the guideline on contact tracing. So it's a things that